Hello, hello. Hey everybody, my name is Matthew McNulty. I'm an engineering director at Google, and I am very excited to welcome you all to the very first ever Web Components SF meetup. So we're really excited to kick off this meetup series where we're going to invite speakers from throughout the Web Components community to share what they've learned, the latest in the web standards world, and of course provide plenty of time for everyone to meet and interact with each other. So first of all, at the top, I just want to remind everyone this is an inclusive event. Our code of conduct is listed on the meetup page, so please familiarize yourself with it and treat everyone here with respect. So tonight we've got talks from Salesforce and Google. Salesforce has bet big on web components in the enterprise, and Diego is here to explain how and why. And after that, Justin from Google will do a deep dive on current and future approaches to styling and theming web components. And finally, we'll wrap things up with an informal panel discussion. But before turning the stage over to our featured speakers, I want to introduce Gray Norton to take a few minutes to reflect on where web components are today and where they're headed.
Hey everybody, I'm Gray. I'm the engineering manager of the Polymer Project. As many of you know, we've been deeply involved with web components since the earliest days. Our project kicked off about 7 years ago as part of the Chrome organization. And our mission was to give developers a first-class native component model for the web, a standard way to extend the semantics of HTML. And the basic requirements were pretty straightforward. First, you should be able to define custom elements that work seamlessly with each other, with the browser's built-in elements, or with elements you might have gotten from other sources. And it should also be possible, easy in fact, to make sure your element won't accidentally stomp on the surrounding page or be stomped on by the surrounding page. And of course, you should be able to control what your element does with any HTML children it might have. But these low-level web platform features would provide direct support for the first time for a wide range of use cases, ranging from design systems to rich embeddable widgets to modular application building blocks. And it all sounds pretty simple, right? But the reality is, by design, web standards move pretty slowly and not always in a straight line. So we could easily spend all night just reviewing the twists and turns we've encountered on the road to web components so far. But I'd actually rather spend a few minutes instead enjoying the view from where we are today and focusing on the road ahead. Because we're as optimistic today as we've ever been about the future of web components, and there are some very good reasons why. First off, when Microsoft officially releases the next version of Edge, which should be imminently, the core web components features will finally, at last, have landed in all major desktop and mobile browsers. Hear, hear. So this means that the polyfills that have been a fact of life for early web components adopters and that have actually discouraged many other developers from even trying them will soon be a thing of the past. And better browser support isn't the only good news. Virtually all of today's most popular frameworks and UI libraries now have very solid support for consuming web components, and increasingly many of them are also making it easier to create and publish web components. And maybe even more excitingly, there's a whole new crop of web component-centric libraries and tools that's begun emerging. Altogether, this means that the biggest barriers to web components adoption have been steadily falling away over the last couple of years. So while it may seem strange to say that something with 7 years of history is just arriving, I think in the case of web components, it's actually true. And the numbers agree. Usage is steadily rising. About 9% rather of page loads across the web now include custom elements, which makes them one of the most widely used new platform features in recent years. So, where is this usage coming from? Who's choosing web components and why? Probably none of you will be too surprised to learn that web components have gained the most traction among organizations building design systems and other types of components that need to just work across many teams and tech stacks. And that's because interop is mission critical for these teams. And if web components have a superpower, it's definitely interop. You can use web components literally anywhere you use HTML in all the same ways. So you can use them with any framework or with no framework at all. You can use them in vanilla HTML, or you can drive them from JavaScript. You can use them in Markdown or your content management system with no need for complicated integration steps. But let's look at a few specific representative examples of web components adopters. We'll start with Ionic. Ionic is a popular high-end framework for building cross-platform mobile apps and now actually desktop apps as well. And they've actually always been built on web technologies, but until recently they were tied to Angular underneath. With their latest version, they've moved to web components, and that lets them serve customers who are using any of the major frameworks. And it happens that along the way, they also built Stencil, which is one of the most prominent of the new web component-centric tools I was talking about earlier. Next up is AMP. It's an open source project that started in Google Search with the aim of helping publishers and advertisers create web content that loads instantly and is reliably performant. And to this end, one of the things that they do is they extend standard HTML with AMP-specific components that add advanced features and bake in performance patterns. Web components make it trivial for them to do that while supporting any method of creating AMP pages. So they support handwritten static pages or server-rendered markup, CMS-generated content, and so on. Moving from framework providers to the enterprise now, consider ING. It's one of the world's largest banks doing business in dozens of countries all over the world. As it turns out, their web presence is actually managed regionally by local dev teams with quite a lot of autonomy. Delivering their design system as web components allows ING to maintain quality and brand consistency despite the diversity of their distributed engineering org. And Electronic Arts is a very similar story. EA is actually made up of many studios that vary widely in size and makeup. And some of these studios custom build promotional websites for their games, while others rely on marketers to build sites using a CMS. But EA's web components-based design system ties all of these together, ensuring that they come together into one cohesive whole. Finally, take YouTube. Like ING and EA, YouTube is a huge entity with many web properties, each built by a largely independent team. Now, YouTube actually has lots of specialized needs arising from their massive scale, so an off-the-shelf framework wasn't a good choice for them. But they absolutely wanted to do component-based development for better developer ergonomics, easier testing, and the ability to share components across teams. So web components gave them the component model they wanted, around which they've essentially built a custom framework to suit their needs. And these same patterns are playing out in similar organizations everywhere. So you'll hear a lot more from Diego in a few minutes about how it's played out at Salesforce. But before I hand the mic to him, let me quickly catch you up on what the Polymer Project itself is up to and how we help to plan move web components forward from here. So over the last couple of years, as it became clear that web components were headed for a successful landing across browsers, we've been gradually adjusting our course to set ourselves up for our next chapter. In getting web components off the ground, we as a team built a lot of stuff. A complete set of custom tools, a large collection of ready-to-use elements, and of course the original Polymer library, which frankly didn't age as well as the standards, and it grew bigger and more complex than we would have liked. But at the end of the day, our mission isn't even to build a lot of products. It's to help developers create great web experiences that make the most of an ever-improving platform. So while we're still supporting users of those early products, our current offerings are much, much simpler. We have lit-HTML, which is a small, fast, expressive library for writing HTML templates in JavaScript. And we have lit-element, which is a versatile, lightweight, custom element-based class that takes care of a lot of the boilerplatey, repetitious work you might do in creating web components and uses lit-HTML under the hood for rendering. Now, we'll likely add some new products down the road, but like lit-HTML and lit-element, they'll be highly focused and loosely coupled from one another. So for example, we're currently working right now on some R&D around server-side rendering web components that we hope to land in the not-too-distant future. And on the standards front, we also are continuing to work, along with other stakeholders, on some incremental specs that will fill in gaps and smooth out the rough edges in the web components story. Diego and Justin are actually going to talk about a few of those incremental specs in their talks, and we'll, of course, talk more about them in future Web Components SF meetups. So if I take a sec to zoom out, if the first phase of the Polymer project was about making web components a reality, then the next phase is going to be about maximizing their impact by helping developers successfully adopt them. And in that vein, I'm excited to announce that we're teaming up with Material Design to take both web components and great UX to the next level. So those of you who followed us know that we've been working with Material Design on a set of material web components for some time, but we actually have much bigger plans in mind, so stay tuned for more news on that front soon. And with that, let me turn it over to our first speaker. Please welcome Diego from Salesforce.